Well, hello everybody out there in webinar land. Today we got a really special event going. We've got quite a good cross section of MEP talent here. Every person on this call comes from the MEP industry, currently works in the MEP industry, and they work for various sizes of firms and even single consultancies. So a pretty good cross section here for everybody to ask questions of and everything. Please, when you have a question, type it into the chat or the question and answer buttons on the bottom of the screen. Please utilize those so we don't have a bunch of people trying to talk over each other. I'll be monitoring those questions and asking the questions of the panelists as they come in. So why don't we kick off with some introductions. Hello, everybody. I'm Don Rasmusson. I'm the Director of MEP Services here at ATG. And these are some of my, I would call them friends, but I'm going to put them on the spot by calling them friends right now. These are some guys that we've met each other through various conferences and things like that over the years, and some really good talent here. And so I'm going to go on my screen from left to right, around like the Brady Bunch here, and that means Jake Adams is the first to introduce himself. So Jake, why don't you go ahead and tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
I'm Jake Adams. I work for Walldinger here in Des Moines, Iowa. I've been in the industry for 9 years, about 6 of that as electrical. And I'm an electrical VDC manager.
Phenomenal. Lucas would be the next one. Lucas Espinoza.
Sure. So I'm Lucas Espinosa. I'm the BIM manager for RZ Design Associates in Rocky Hill, Connecticut. We're an MEP and structural consultant firm. I've been in the industry for coming up on 10 years. I've been a BIM manager for 3 of those years now. I spent some time doing VDC work on the contracting side, prefabrication, design, coordination. 3 years ago, I came back to the design side doing BIM management. A lot of my time is training and helping people produce, and then what time I have elsewhere to just keep developing and pushing us forward.
Awesome. Thank you, Lucas. Mr. Daniel Villeneuve, it's your turn to introduce yourself to the folks.
Hello, Dan Villeneuve. With Fitzmeyer and Tucci. Been in the industry for 20 years, 15 of those as a BIM manager. Currently, I am the BIM and technology manager. Again, Fitzmeyer and Tucci. We're an East Coast MEP consulting firm. And my role is typical BIM manager roles along with, technology management, mostly just overseeing IT as well as BIM management.
Oh, phenomenal. Thank you, Dan. Mr. John Atkinson, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm John Atkinson, the National Engineering BIM Manager for DLR Group. We've got 26 national offices and then 3 international offices. I've been doing the whole BIM thing since, 2006, but started in architecture in 96.
Oh, we won't hold that against you.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, and then thank you, John. Scott Fanello, your turn to introduce yourself to the folks.
Yeah. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. Name's Scott Finnell. I'm a registered electrical designer in the state of Wisconsin. I filled the role as Director of Building Information Modeling in my previous life. And right now, so I've been in the AEC industry for a little over 23 years. So yeah, I got just a little bit of experience.
Just a little bit, just a little bit. All right, well, thank you, Scott. Mr. Blake Guither, it is your turn to introduce yourself to the folks.
Hey guys, I'm Mr. Blake Guither. I'm one of Don's friends. I've been in the industry for about 12 years now. I work at Gausman and Moore Associates in St. Paul, Twin Cities, Minnesota. I love the cold world and the snow. I got a background in energy modeling. I'm a developer for the MEP Productivity Pack, and I enjoy using Revit and enjoy these virtual webinars.
Oh, thank you, Blake. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Stephen Bunker, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey guys, I'm Stephen Bunker. I'm an electrical engineer. I'm a self-employed sole proprietor offering design services in Georgia. I live in Athens, Georgia. I also provide BIM consulting services, and along with Blake, I'm a developer of CTC's MEP Productivity Pack. And just happy to be here, and hopefully I can have good input.
Awesome. Well, guys, I'd like to thank all the panelists, obviously, for coming, taking time out of their day to have this conversation with us. Thank you so much, guys. Really do appreciate that. I noticed that some questions haven't come into the chat window quite yet. So everybody, obviously, feel free to type in your questions either as they come up or anything that's fresh on your mind that you want to have us discuss today. Since there isn't any questions in there quite yet, I thought we might start with kind of the topic that we ended with when this panelist team got together on Monday. And that is the topic of, is this really the new normal? Are we ever going to be able to get back to something that more closely resembles what it was prior to COVID, right? Or is it going to be kind of a hybrid of what it was prior and what it is right now? Just kind of can kind of start in the order in which we introduced each other. What are your firms kind of doing doing right now to deal with the current situation? And then what are you guys looking at, moving forward?
So here at Walldinger, we actually, we moved some of our people remote, but we've had the office open the entire time. The electrical crew has been here the entire time. I went 50-50 because my son's daycare wasn't open. I think it's gonna be a little bit different. I think now that everyone's more set up for online and remote work, I think the ideal of, hey, if you're not feeling well, just work from home that day, I think that's gonna stay around. But I think we'll probably end up back in the office. I know we've got a phased approach that just came out this week, so.
Okay.
It's coming back.
Okay. And you're in Iowa, right? So
Yep.
Midwest, and that's kind of how, Iowa, state by state is the challenge here, unfortunately.
Right. Yep.
So I know Dan and Lucas are out on the East Coast. You're in different states on the East Coast. How are things kind of going out there? And do we see kind of a hybrid approach coming back?
Yeah, I mean, so Connecticut had those stay-at-home orders pretty early. So we luckily had already started migrating Revit stuff to BIM 360, so it was a bit of an easy transition there. We didn't have the VPN. We needed to come over there. People still have to use it for CAD projects, but Revit-wise, and we told people to pack up their workstations, go home with them, and just log in. It was a pretty smooth transition. The first couple of weeks were a little rocky with, just getting people set up. Some people never set up a computer before, things like that. But other than that, we got working and productivity just stayed the same. We reopened the week after Memorial Day. The majority of people have actually come back. There was actually a handful of people that were still coming into the office, I guess. I didn't know that until later. There's a few people that are staying home now. They have family that they're taking care of, or their children are at home and the schools are still closed. I think we're very much moving to a hybrid thing. My company, I've been pushing since I joined to get people laptops. Next upgrade, get everyone laptops so that we can have the flexibility to go home. I think there is, I don't know if this is exclusive to my company. I have a feeling it's other companies too, a certain trust level too. You got to trust your people to be professional and go home and do their work. And for whatever reason, I think some companies just never got to that all around. And I think this kind of forced their hand in this. So I think we're going to start to see that a little bit more. We've handed out a couple laptops to a few people as it is. And we obviously had people working from home for almost 3 months. I think going forward, we're still going to very much have an office thing. It was a big push to get us back in. But I think that trust is going to be opened up a lot more going forward here.
No, that's a great point, Lucas. I've noticed the same thing. I think that we're all going to be forced to trust our employees a little bit more. Reading old case studies of working from home when people were starting to do that, those old case studies were stating that, you could expect a 20 to 30% drop off in productivity with at-home employees. I think that has changed quite a bit in the past, 5 years, 5 years, drastically. So Dan, I know that your company is dealing with that kind of uniquely. So how are you guys dealing with the remote stuff?
Right. So to second Lucas's point, I think the transition and the expectations of working from home are now different. Now they're understood to be equivalent. We can produce efficiently. We can sustain 100% of a staff's environment virtually. And I think some of the hurdle that was unanswered before COVID quarantine was, how do we communicate? How do we see each other face to face, and how do we establish collaborative workflows virtually? And luckily, we've transitioned over to Teams as an application for communication, which really streamlined that transition period. And again, to Lucas's point, upper management made a decision about 5 years back to go completely laptops and do away with workstations completely. So we just found ourselves kind of prime in being structured to work virtually when this whole thing hit. What we didn't know at the time was, can our VPN sustain 100% connectivity through VPN? And like it was already mentioned, there was some hurdles in the first week or two, and we had to iron out some kinks. But once those were done away with, we were able to establish a consistent connection through VPN. Now, moving forward, I think the understanding from executive levels across the industry are, we can do this, and maybe we can reduce footprints or be a little bit more flexible in allowing work from home capabilities on a one-on-one basis, or that's to be decided. We might see entire organizations shift to 50-50. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. No, thank you, Dan. John, I know that you've got kind of a unique situation being involved with so many different offices across the world, basically. How is a company of that size kind of dealing with this?
We actually had a really good IT team. We weren't really planning for it, but it just kind of worked out that way. That when everybody kind of went home and into isolation, that we were kind of prepared for it. The one thing that was kind of a sticking point was getting all the older projects or smaller projects that were still on like Revit server pushed up into BIM 360. That took us a couple of weeks, but yeah, no real dip in productivity. Had everybody up and working relatively quickly. Mm-hmm. So it was pretty good. And we were already using Teams and a couple other pieces of software to promote working across regions, mm-hmm. Across different offices. So it turned out really well for us. But I think long term, some of our offices are starting to open up a little bit more. Some people never left, but we are, you got a list of people and there's office planning and whatnot that says, well, okay, we need 50%, so half you need to stay home. Mm-hmm. And then I think we'll slowly open up again.
Sure. Okay. And Scott, going from a really big firm to a relatively mid-sized to small firm, how are the challenges dealing with all this going with you guys?
Actually, it went really well. Here at Design Engineers, we were already set up on BIM 360 for all of our projects. So that transition with people working from home went really, really well. Did not see the dip in productivity that I think that was kind of feared ultimately going into it. Yeah, there were challenges with figuring out what remote programs worked best. We tried TeamViewer, Remote Desktop, and a few others just to kind of work out kinks and how those virtual calls work when you're trying to use Teams and stuff like that. Is all that connectivity stuff, is it working through your remote computer back at the office or your laptop at home and that kind of stuff. So obviously the hurdles like everybody else mentioned, but otherwise it went really, really well. We took the approach of kind of quarantining and staying away for a while, but we're back in the office now. We've separated, we keep our distance from each other and stuff like that. And I said that the best thing to do is just to request like 6 more monitors to build up, to create that separation, I think, from everybody. I think that would work out really, really well. And then you don't have to worry about it. So
you make you feel like you're at home, but at the office.
Absolutely.
Yeah. A monitor wall partition. Oh, there's a good thought right there.
Right.
So thank you, Scott. Blake, how are you guys kind of dealing with that at Gausman and Moore?
Yeah, you know, for us, it was kind of a question of where do we want the horsepower? And, you know, for most of us, we ended up keeping our desktops here in the office, and most people already had personal PCs or things at home. Me, myself, I've worked from home for on and off for quite a while, you know, and it's like a decent laptop with a 27-inch additional monitor at home is all I've needed, you know, and then we remote in, we VPN into our machines here at the office, and then we're fully connected to everything on the network at that point. You know, and I've seen some of the Q&A come in, you know, people were asking about family content and this and that. So
Mm-hmm.
for us at Gausman and More, we're still using our networks there. We're VPN in to our machines, you know, and we're keeping the horsepower here for the time being. I'd imagine we'll be talking a little bit more about BIM 360, but that has also helped the transition quite a bit. With the ability to open that from a machine at the office or even from home too, if the network has low latency or something like that. So that's where we're at. It's worked out all right. The office is now back open, but it still is really light traffic here. I'm actually here today, but you know, we're at like 5% occupancy. Me, myself, I don't think I'll ever go back to 5 days a week in the office. You know, it's just so convenient to work at home at times. So, you know, I think it's going to be a hybrid world, and firms that want to keep good talent, they're going to have options open for people where they can work in the office part days, you know, or for meetings. And then there's also going to have no issues with working from home. So.
No, I agree. Thanks, Blake. Steve, curious to see how this has changed a single consultancy. So how are you struggling to communicate with yourself during COVID?
Well, as a sole proprietor, my main issues have been with marketing and going out and rubbing elbows with people. I don't know how well that will translate to the rest of the attendees here, and how many people do business development and marketing. The original question though of whether this is the new normal, I don't think anyone thinks that it will be the new normal, that we're all working from home as we have been now and quarantining. I think that this has made companies that have been previously very reticent to remote work or hiring someone from outside of a certain geographic area certainly made them more comfortable doing so, seeing that it can work. I still personally think though that it's still going to be the normal for people to work in the office, especially for on the engineering and design side, because you've got, you know, new designers fresh out of college who they need to be trained, and they need that hands-on, seeing how people work, seeing what people do, and that can be really hard to get remotely, because it's even no matter how easy it is to have video chats and team chats and things, there's still a much greater barrier than just poking your head over the cube or walking around the corner to ask somebody, hey, how do you deal with this particular design challenge? On the BIM and the technology side, you know, it's much more amenable to remote work, I think, but problems that will have to be considered and people should think about now, you know, while we're still in this crisis, is what does our new onboarding procedures look like? How do we train people? How do we train new employees on our standards when we can't just go pull up a chair at their desk and show them where everything is? And that's something that we're really going to have to think about, you know, moving forward, both in this crisis and as we hire remotely in the future.
Exactly, Stephen, and I completely agree, and that's actually one of the topics I have on my list, but we've got a couple questions here from people. Just to kind of wrap up this topic a little bit though, guys, any of the panelists who are running teams notice any significant drop-off in productivity during this whole COVID thing and everybody having to go remote, other than your first couple of weeks of having to get everybody set up? Did you experience a drastic loss or a measurable loss in productivity over the past 3 months?
Initially, I'd say yeah, but then as people got more acquainted and used to their new environments, I think productivity went back to normal per se. But initially, for sure, yeah, we saw a hit initially, but kind of balanced out.
Yeah. We started using Teams basically right when this all started and when I was going 50% of the time. You know, I've got one direct report, and then I've got a bunch of support staff that I have to deal with for, you know, supporting their software. And so for me, going 50% of the time, I'm the person that they come to and ask the questions to. So it was kind of interesting to get teams on board and, you know, hey, if you need me, I'm just a screen share away, you know. At first it was a little rough, but I haven't seen any issues using Teams to basically go back and forth. And I like the fact that we both can see our mouse instead of it all being just one mouse being controlled. And so that's made it a lot easier for me to answer questions, get things done. And the other thing is our users are starting to become a little bit more self-reliant on what they're doing, because they know that, okay, if I ask a question, I have to share my screen, I have to do all this stuff. So it makes them actually look at the training guides that we have built and try to figure it out themselves. So it's been kind of a good thing.
All right.
I would second that. As heavily invested in Microsoft Teams as we are, I've actually found increased productivity and in communication and training. And the reason being is, you know, I can line up multiple Microsoft Teams meetings, jump on somebody's workstation, see face-to-face with an individual. And if it's something that I find 2 or 3 other attendees would benefit in training, I just add them to the call. So there is no booking of conference rooms. There is no trying to get everybody's calendars in order. It's really just when the problem is currently in front of us, we address it. We show people how to get past that problem. Can do it remotely without getting up off our desks and finding a collaborative space. And to that standpoint, it's really been efficient. And I found that people are increasing their communication out to me, asking for assistance when needed, as opposed to just trying to create Band-Aid situations and workarounds. So it's been beneficial in that aspect for sure.
Phenomenal. It's great to hear, Dan.
I'd like to echo that, just the productivity side of all that. We saw that the first week was a little tough, but yeah, I know there was a lot of skepticism from higher up about we're going to drop in productivity, but we didn't miss deadlines. Products still went out. If anything, the actual productivity that I think went down was mine from a standpoint. As the BIM manager, one of the things I like to do is walk around and observe how people are working and try and find, you know, oh, hey, okay, I see you doing that, but maybe you should try this route instead. Can't do that when we're all working remotely. So that was actually a bit of a, you know, I got a lot of time to develop stuff that I've been looking forward to doing, some auditing, other stuff that I can't do when people are asking questions left and right. That's where, you know, the whole self-reliance thing, that was nice. But at the same time, that aspect of my job that requires me to walk around and just kind of observe, and, you know, I find stuff, conversations people are having, I'm like, what do you mean? We can go do that. We can, there's a means for us to solve that problem in Revit. I can't do that organically anymore. People have to come to me and say, hey, can we do this? And they don't always do that. So that's, I guess, a pro for actually working in a collaborative physical environment versus this remote situation.
Yeah, and it's one of the things we got to be mindful of losing, right? Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I have to say that, you know, Teams has been just a boon for us. Just being able to, all the different tasks and tabs and things that you can incorporate into the projects are fantastic. So
awesome. Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions. Teams versus Skype versus Zoom versus GoToMeeting, like which is the best one to leverage? And it sounds like we've already started leveraging MS Teams, and people are really enjoying MS Teams. We leverage Zoom at ETG, but I have to do some client meetings on Teams. I've enjoyed it so far. Pretty useful tool, aptly timed as well.
Yeah, we do a lot of Teams for internal stuff, and then we use Zoom a lot for external. So if we've got to meet with a client or something, it's usually on Zoom. Otherwise, all internal stuff is more on Teams. And we still have Skype. Some people use it for instant messaging, but I've kind of moved all that over to Teams.
Oh, fair. So guys, we got a question in from our clients here. With the improvements in BIM 360 for cloud work sharing for remote work environments on the at the project level, what are we doing with families that are outside of our templates? You know, are we leveraging a VPN? Are we leveraging cloud-based systems like Hive or any sort of content management? So we obviously, if you're using a VPN, the folder structure that you've deployed is staying in place. So for those of us who aren't using a VPN, how are you guys kind of dealing with content?
We're still using VPN for that, but what we're doing now is when we set up the project, we're actually, so I normally set them up when I'm setting up projects, I actually take a look to see what content people will need. So that way some of that stuff's already just loaded into the project, where before we would just, you know, go out and find it and load it in. So we're kind of doing what most say not to do, which is starting to load up the template with a little bit more stuff in it. But we haven't really seen much, you know, on the electrical side that's hurt, so.
Okay. Obviously, there's cloud-based solutions out there that can be leveraged. You know, Hive is one that CTC makes it is pretty good for a cloud-based content management system. But are all the panelists on the call still using a VPN to get at family content?
VPN for me.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we maintain a Hive library as well as a cloud-based
VPN
server plus
Okay.
VPN.
So all three. Well, your company is big enough; you can afford all three, right? All right. Moving on from that question, guys, we'll go right into the next one then. A question about laptops and working with AutoCAD and Revit from home on a laptop. Laptops traditionally haven't been the highest performing PCs that you can get. A lot of that has changed though, however. So if you guys are getting laptops, and Lucas, this is one of the things that you had mentioned in the first topic, what are your standards for laptops? Do you notice productivity issues because you're laptops and not desktops?
I've always used the laptop. I think every job I've had, I've worked off of a laptop. I've never really noticed performance issues. I mean, I'm not the IT guy. I'm not the guy that specs our hardware or anything. My understanding is Revit, throw enough RAM at it, and generally pretty good. A decent processor. It's really not too much. It's not that intensive a program unless you're doing like rendering and stuff, which we're MEP, we don't do that. So I haven't really had too many issues with working off a laptop for the near 10 years that I've been using Revit.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Our engineering staff is now switching over to laptops. But mine was actually the first one that we used, and they've been pretty happy with how it was working. So one of our new engineers just got one. We're starting to push more towards the laptops. It's all about the processor speed and the RAM. If you've got enough processing speed on a, you know, closer to a single core, you know, mine's an 8-core processor, you can do a lot of that. You don't need all the graphics. You know, so we're switching over to that. Now our VDC group, they're still using box machines, but they're also, like most of all of our detailers are actually field staff. So they work through the union contracts, which means they are either here or they're not here. So there's no point in putting them in a laptop. We did have some of them get sent home with their machines though, so that they could work from home.
Yeah, and I've been, oh, go ahead, Dan, go ahead.
Well, comparing to my past experiences before Fitzmeyer and Tucci, we've always been workstation shops. And actually coming into this position, I was a bit skeptical on how the laptops would perform. But coming right into the environment, you know, the laptops were comparatively priced with the workstations. We pumped them with 32 gigs of RAM. We actually have decent video cards in there, 4 gig video cards and NVIDIAs. In most cases, and obviously, you know, decent processor. And I haven't seen any decrease in productivity compared to the pretty high-end workstations that I was used to. So yeah, no change.
Kind of seems like we want to balance with laptops. You know, it's almost like we don't want a laptop that can do everything, that can run VR, that can run very intensive graphic operations. So like we have stronger machines here in the office that we'll remote into if we need that type of stuff. Plus, you know, no one wants to carry around a laptop that's 30, 40 pounds. Like I've seen you walk, you and John have walked around with some heavy laptops. You know, no one wants that. So if you find that right balance, I mean, yeah, you can certainly run Revit on it, no problem. And then when you need more horsepower, remote into something else.
Yep.
That seems to be a pretty standard from what I've seen out there. Obviously here at ATG, we sell Binbox computers, guys. Binbox computers are the fastest production computers for a laptop or a desktop that are made for specifically for Revit and anything in the AEC space, obviously for that. So that there are some extremely powerful laptops, but obviously you have to balance that with value, right? Not everybody's going to be able to afford to spend tens of thousands of dollars to retool on laptops, right? So you got to pick something that works for you. Something that I'd like to add to this discussion that I usually tell clients is gaming computers. It's just really simple. Start looking at gaming computers, gaming laptops, and those usually have the specs that you need typically right off the shelf that you need to be successful with Revit.
And they're cheaper. They're cheaper than commercial machines, you know?
Yeah, they're coming down now. Yes, quite a bit. So another question here. Has anyone had issues with any users that have subpar internet connections and causing issues? So if you have some employees that live in rural areas, or maybe, 5 megabytes up and 5 megabytes down is what they get. That's the top notch. Is anybody dealing with that on the panel right now?
We had a couple of people that had some subpar internet, but they actually ended up just staying in the office.
Yep.
We actually had a couple of people that don't have any internet, which I find fascinating.
Wow.
Yeah, we've got one guy who doesn't have internet. He was in the office the entire time, and then we have a couple that are out in the country that they just came into the office when they needed to. Otherwise, not really.
Yeah,
We had one, go ahead.
Go ahead,
Lucas.
Blake. We had one guy that I think he's one of our design engineers. I think he got peer pressured into moving up from his dial-up or DSL, whatever he was on, to get cable internet. And then a handful of other people just came into the office. In the office, we normally support 50 some odd people, and with 6 people in there, you can spread out just fine. So yeah, we had a few doing that, and then he just upgraded and no issues.
Yeah, and we can't forget about cell phone options too. We had someone that had poor internet service, and their cell phone provider actually was really solid. So the company chipped in some of their cell phone bills. So they just used their cell phone as a hotspot, which worked just fine for what they were doing.
Mm-hmm. Tethering. And that brings up another good point, Blake. Have you guys started having some discussions about maybe like per diem changes or home office stipends and things like that are potentially coming down because you anticipate working from home more, leveraging that internet connection, leveraging your cell phone for work opportunities? Is that discussion? Have you guys seen that discussion come up at work yet?
Definitely. It's being had now, and the balance is quite difficult, I mean, depending on how that situation moves forward. If people are expected to come into the office, obviously they need the equipment. And then at this point, we can't really establish shared spaces back at the office because that's just not that's obviously not a safe solution. So the discussion's being had. Nothing locked in as far as what direction we're going to go as far as the organization goes, but definitely a hot topic. Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are having that discussion right now. And I would imagine a firm the size of like John's or Fitzmeyer and Tucci, for example, that represents a significant amount of money, a significant investment in your people.
Yeah, I have heard stories that some people have upgraded their internet and given a little stipend by the office, but I haven't seen it personally.
Okay.
Well, hopefully we all know the tax write-off. The internet used at home. It's a tax write-off currently, guys. Keep track of that.
I know around by us, some of the service providers actually offered free ISP upgrades during all this just to help people out with that. So
that's great.
Yeah, that was nice.
Like free BIM 360. It's awesome.
Exactly.
Right. So we got a fun question here. What's the best thing about working from home since you started working from home? And we'll start with Steve. Steve, we'll go backwards this time. So Steve, we'll start with you. What's the best thing about working from home?
Sure. Well, I always work from home, so that wasn't a change for me. Really, the best thing for me about working from home has been the flexibility, especially, I mean, I have two small children, and sometimes, they do go to daycare, but sometimes you just need to go get them, take them to the doctor, things like that. And just, so it's from the family perspective and the flexibility that affords me. That's what I like the best, and what my family likes the best. My wife also works full-time outside the home. And you can expand on the flexibility. I could just, run downstairs to the kitchen and make myself a sandwich for lunch instead of, and it's always better than something that's been sitting in your lunchbox all afternoon or going out.
Yep.
So, I really enjoy working from home, and I think most people enjoy working from home at least some of the time. What I miss the most, this wasn't the question, but I really miss the camaraderie of having other people to banter with and chat with and tell jokes. And at my company last year, when SpaceX launched the Falcon Heavy, we all watched, the whole company got together on the big screen and watched the Falcon Heavy launch and landing, and just things like that we miss, or I miss, and I expect most people do as well. So there's pros and cons.
That was actually a follow-up question there, Steve. So way to read my mind. The best and worst things about working from home. So Blake, question to you. What's the best and worst thing about working from home? So even though you've been a 50-50 employee for a while here.
Best thing is family, being home with family. I'm always on time for dinner now. I'm never late for dinner anymore. So dinners are important. The thing I miss is, I miss, like Steven said, the camaraderie, the joking around with friends and coworkers, and the face-to-face banter. I mean, that's an important part of life.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. Mr. Fanello, what's the best and the worst thing about working from home?
I think Stephen and Blake said it the best. For me, this was a hard time for everybody, and a lot of my kids are a lot older, and they've got, not a lot, they're older in school age, and a lot of their stuff got canceled, trips, all that kind of stuff. And so it was nice to be there for them, to help support them during all this. It was nice just to be able to roll out of bed and right at my computer and start work, and dare I, so that was nice. But I second what Stephen and Blake said too, just that camaraderie with people I missed. I will say one of the things that I found difficult with working from home was actually disconnecting at the end of the day. Like, it was too easy for me just to kind of keep right on going and just, not really fully disconnecting from work and stuff. So I think that was probably the only con of the whole thing. But otherwise, no. Again, being able to spend that little extra time with family where you're not doing the commuting and stuff like that, that was kind of nice.
Regarding the disconnecting, if I may offer, I actually set an alarm for when I stop, and my alarm goes off, and I know it's time to shut down. And so just little things like that can be a trigger to help you. I mean, I work from home always, so these are
Oh, we might have Steven. I think we might have lost Steven there a little bit, guys. So that's unfortunate. Oh, he's back. There he is. All right.
Oh no, I didn't know I'd cut off, so I don't know how much you got, but I'll turn it over to someone else.
John, how about you? Best and worst thing about working from home?
Well, really, my day-to-day workflow hasn't changed. Just the location. So, I mean, 95% of my job has always been online. All my phone calls, all my coworkers. It's a rare handful that were actually within my office. So not a lot has changed for me, except I do find myself putting in quite a bit more hours. So it's just a matter of making sure you do take the time, getting up and walking away from the computer once in a while is pretty key.
Mm-hmm. Dan, how about you? Best and worst thing?
Well, similar to what John mentioned, I think I typically deal with a 50-minute commute when traffic was what it was. So 2 hours on the road each day. Best thing is, I wake up, I come downstairs, and I'm right at work. To avoid those long commutes, I used to go into the office early and spend a long day. Now my long day is pretty much as efficient as it can be. I still do 10 hours a day, and it feels like just a normal day. I still shut down at 5 o'clock, but I'm still at my computer at 6:37. So I feel like gaining additional work productivity hours was definitely a beneficial task, especially during these times as supporting an organization. I feel like during this downturn, we are busier than the design staff is during a downturn. So there's more to get done in less time available. So getting those 2 hours per day to tackle those issues was definitely a huge benefit. The downside is obviously the camaraderie, just getting out of the work environment from home and change of pace, change of scenery, seeing fresh faces every day. It's something to be missed, and I think everybody can agree.
Mm-hmm. No, I think you're right, Dan. So Lucas, for you, best and worst thing about working from home?
So best thing, I work long hours. My wife is a high school band teacher. She works long hours, especially certain times of the year. We both love to cook. But normally we meal prep on Sundays and we eat the same damn thing every day. Working from home, we got to cook a lot more. I got into smoking meats a couple years back, and I was smoking ribs on a Wednesday. It was awesome. Worst, I think I touched on this a little bit earlier. So I went into this year with a goal of getting my support staff up to such a degree that for 80% of problems or issues that come up with other production staff, they could handle the issues. And now I kept training going during those two and a half months that we were working from home, but it was a lot harder, and I didn't get done the amount of stuff that I wanted to do from training that support staff. And just being able to walk and observe what people are doing. Losing out on that was tough, and it probably set me back some time as a result. So that was definitely a bit of a punch right there.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and well said, Lucas. Jake, how about you?
Probably the best thing would be that dedicated time. Since I'm 50-50, the time that I'm at home, I typically use for development. And then the time I'm in the office, I use for projects. So having that divide and actually saying, hey, I'm actually going to work on development, I actually get it done now, where before it was kind of a, hey, this project's still creeping in. Well, when you're at home, you don't have anyone, bringing you all that information at different times. So that's been kind of nice. Worst thing, I've got a 4-year-old, and he's getting very bored. So I'm getting things thrown at my head when I, get zoned in, and he, wants a snack or something. So, but that also is a caveat to a good thing too, getting more time with him. So I know he's excited to go back to daycare. I think he starts here in July. So
It's only a matter of time, Jake, till they're Nerf bullets.
The good thing of that one is right now he can't pull back the thing. He can shoot it, but he can't pull it back. So I just don't pull it back. He's get shot in the head.
Yeah, you got a few more months of sanity, maybe.
Right.
I'll even chime on this one. Obviously, spending more time with family is super nice. All the panelists know I'm one of those crazy guys who I have a hard time stop working even when I'm in the office. So this has been kind of a blessing for me to be here with my kid every day and help him with his schoolwork and do those things. It's been stressful at times, but I'm the world's best MEP director / geometry teacher / art teacher / music teacher that there is out there right now. That's how I'm kind of dealing with this. So that, and it is, for me, guys, it's awesome. I haven't put on a pair of jeans or pants. I've only wore shorts for 3 months, and I love it. I absolutely love it.
So this is the first time in 3 months that I actually put on a collared shirt.
See, it's the dress down mentality. Gotta love it. Yep. Alrighty, guys. Let's move on to another topic here and want to be respectful of everybody's time. Obviously, we got about 13 minutes left. We can maybe go a little bit longer since we started a little later than 11 o'clock. But again, obviously want to be respectful of everybody's time. We kind of talked about, you know, what the new normal might look like versus what we might get back to, and what tools we're kind of using for that. Obviously, BIM 360 has come up, guys. I think everybody is leveraging BIM 360 in some way, shape, manner, or form during this remote process. And if you're not leveraging BIM 360, obviously we would recommend that you start to take a peek at BIM 360 and utilizing it. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about the onboarding, and kind of, you know, we had touched on it a little bit, and if I could sum it up maybe as this, if you guys agree, kind of like a risking the loss of a culture from a company's perspective, since you're not able to have that as easily as you were before. It's not as easy as walking down the hallway and saying, hey man, I'm going to go to lunch, you want to come? You know, those options aren't there as much as they used to be. So guys, I'll just open up to the panel in terms of that. So you know, bringing on new people, getting them trained in, getting your company culture established with new people during this. What are some things that we've been doing, or tips and tricks, things that have been tried that can make it better?
I know for us here, we've had some interns starting, and we've had some new staff start. Kind of separate from the training aspect of it, we, you know, when we were all stuck at home, we every week we made it a point to have like a happy hour, a virtual happy hour. We split up in groups so that everybody could kind of meet and get to know the new people, and that really kind of helped, especially once we moved back into the office. You kind of had that quote unquote rapport already kind of started, and so that helped a lot, I think, on our end.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, we've got our whole onboarding process. It's got a whole program, virtual training. We're using the Globally and some other stuff just to kind of get people on board and up to speed.
Okay.
We've been utilizing through presenting through Microsoft Teams more often. We've been recording our sessions and hosting those up to Microsoft Stream, and repurposing those videos for people that have missed the training or new hires that are coming on. We can replay those trainings after the fact. So actually during this whole situation, we've been building our video library and personal training material quite rapidly, just because we are presenting through Teams in that fashion. So that's definitely going to benefit us as we increase our onboarding procedures.
Yeah, I think Stephen kind of touched on this point earlier. It would be easier to onboard someone that's been in the industry for 10 years, for example, than someone right out of school. And that's kind of where I see the bigger challenge is when you get that someone right out of school that's a sponge trying to soak up as much as they can. That face-to-face is huge, you know, for them. So that's where I guess yeah, one of the challenges I see.
No, and fair, right? So much of what we do from an onboarding perspective is geared towards being there physically together, right? I'm onboarding a new employee this week and last week, and I'll admit it, guys, it's not the same as it was before, and it's been kind of a struggle, not necessarily for that employee, but for me to get used to doing things this way. Just don't have that same freedom that you do when you're in the office, and everything really has to be, what I've noticed is really planned out. If you didn't spend a couple days planning how you were going to engage this person and juggle them with all the other things that you have going on from a professional level, it's really turns into a game of phone tag and some hits and misses there. So I think planning is a real big part of what we're going to be looking at moving forward, because everybody's time is going to be claimed basically on a calendar.
I think that's something. Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
On the face-to-face time, like Blake was talking about, so something that we have at home that we don't have as much of in the office is privacy. And because at the office, we're in a cube, or even if we're in the office, our door can be open, and generally if our door is open, anybody can poke their head in. And if we need our door to be closed, we close the door. And I think that one strategy that we might, as we're working with teammates, is to try to have something of an open door policy in regards to, if you need to talk to me, just ring me up on Teams. I'm here, I will answer. It's just like poking your head in the office. If I'm not available, I won't answer in a message. But so often, I think that we rely on video chat as being a scheduled thing. I'm going to set up a meeting and we're going to do it at this time. And that can really be a hindrance or a burden to the open back and forth communication. So I think encouraging our guys to just call us directly on Teams, and I'm here. I'm here for you, and you can have the time you need with me. Is a good habit to develop.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and I second that. I know that this is definitely a transition that is a step back from face-to-face presentations, face-to-face trainings and orientations. But I really think it is a transition that could be and is potentially a more productive, a more efficient practice. Yes, less personable. Instead of somebody hearing you say that presentation for the 50th time, it's a video presentation, but the material is the same. And I think the way that we follow up and make sure that those individuals retain that information may change. But I definitely see that the delivery is definitely a process that's in a transitioning period right now.
I noticed
go ahead, Jake.
I noticed I respond faster. When someone needs something, when I was in the office, they might walk over, hey, do you got a second? And my answer might be, no, I really need to finish this. But I've noticed with Teams, it's one of those things where I'm going to respond to the question a little bit quicker. One, because I know that they're probably hindered. They can't see that I'm busy. And then two, I think typically when I answer a question in person, face to face, it ends up veering off the road into another conversation about stuff. So then it takes hours and hours and hours out of the day, where on Teams, it's more of a straight through answer of, okay, you need this, this, and this, and here's your answers to all those. So I think it's actually helped, get some of the answers quicker, but it does lose out on some of that personability time.
Have you guys found that you are using Teams as a kind of quick response versus Outlook in sending emails? I know I noticed I've really stopped using my Outlook, as the main communication. So I really haven't been paying attention to my emails except maybe once an hour. Whereas Teams, I'm there, I'm on it.
Yeah, I kind of treat Teams kind of like my cell phone. If you want to get hold of me, you text me or you call me on my cell phone. If you don't need something right away, you email me. So Teams has became more of that, it's one of my direct connect pieces. And usually it's something that can be answered quicker. And half the time it's, here's your answer and I'll send you all the links in the email. That way they have it for later.
The way
I would second.
The way I
Sorry, go ahead, Lucas.
Sorry. The way I explained it to my staff is think of this as like an open cubicle, just virtually. Someone's got a question, just chime in. Someone's going to answer. It really opens up that dialogue a lot better. It'd be great if we could, have like a ongoing Zoom or something like that. But okay, we're home, keep some privacy or whatever. But at the very least, if I'm not here, someone could post a question in that chat and maybe someone else has the answer, and it really opened up that dialogue a lot. And there were times when I would see the questions and I would just hold back and wait to see what the group would do. And eventually someone would come up with an answer, a dialogue would get started. It was really cool to see. It's a lot different than the office where someone just comes immediately to me and it's to my office and I want this answer. So it's a pretty cool dynamic, I thought.
Yeah. These programs have really made it faster for people to come to answers. One of the attendees mentioned Slack. I don't know if you guys are using that. Probably not if you're that into Teams, but we use Slack just for quick questions.
Yep, we do too.
Not email based, and that's nice, because we've got a Revit support Slack channel. So anyone that's having Revit issues can throw a question up there, and then it doesn't have to be me that answers it. You know, like Lucas said, it's one of 10 people that can get back to that person real quick.
And have you guys noticed that, I've noticed this with my team, since we've gone more remote, there's more inter-team communication. It's not all coming to me and then getting dictated down. My guys are talking to each other at a much higher volume than they did before. Have you guys noticed the same thing on your teams?
Yeah.
Definitely. So it's, as far as the email chatter internal to our organization, it's almost down to nothing. We don't email each other. It's all Teams chats. When it comes to external emails and things that we have to file, obviously email's still king, but Teams communication and group Teams communication has been really efficient in providing answers outside of the administrative staff and my own department. In addition, somebody mentioned, that the cell phone calling is one aspect of communication and Teams chatting. We've merged the two so that if anybody wants to get a hold of me, Teams video chat is really a substitution to my cell phone. People don't call my cell half as often as they used to. They just send me a Teams video message and or video chat, and I'll pick up through the Teams application on my cell phone. So it really is the all-inclusive communication platform for business.
All right, so to sum it up, if you're not using MS Teams, probably should think about using MS Teams. It sounds like everybody's having a great time with Microsoft Teams. So guys, we're getting close to the.
It's really hard to see the. It is really hard to see a Revit screen on your phone.
Well, I'm sure everybody here has seen enough Revit environments that you can almost do it by memory at this point.
We are getting a check from Microsoft, right, for plugging it this much?
Yeah, right. So guys, we got a couple questions left and we'll wrap it up. We talked a little bit about dealing with content outside of BIM 360, right? Because BIM 360 is a great project solution, but there are some things that it's not doing currently, content being one of them. We had another question here about some other things that, BIM 360 can't handle. For example, inserting views from other BIM 360 files is not available, things like that. Does anybody, have any tips and tricks on like kind of how you're dealing with some of those things that BIM 360 isn't covering holistically?
One of the things that we do whenever we share a model is we e-transmit it, and there's checkboxes that we do. As far as I know, e-transmit does not work off of BIM 360. Like it can't access it, bogs down or something like that. I've never been able to get it to work. So what we end up doing is we either publish and download the source file. That can be time consuming, or I'll just have someone do a save as locally and then e-transmit that save as version. It's a bit of a pain, but it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Same if you need to import a view or whatever, like save it locally and then do it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we've been doing the same thing too for deliverables. It's got to be pulled down locally, cleaned up, e-transmit. Yep, so everything's got to be tracked. So I think if we give BIM 360 some time, that it eventually gets there, especially given now that it's been pretty much put everywhere. So I think you're going to see some new features come out in BIM 360 here really quickly, actually, to help us deal with what we've all been dealing with for the past 3 months. So another question that we have here is, what solutions have you used for using AutoCAD across a VPN or remote desktop? Most of everybody on the call is primarily Revit. If I had to venture a guess as to who may leverage still a decent amount of CAD, it would probably be Jake. If you, to the extent that you do.
Yeah, most everything now is all Revit. We typically just use a VPN, so we're still doing our one lines out of AutoCAD because we're using an add-in that allows us to do that. And more or less, we open that VPN, we make sure that we've got a good connection, and go from there. I haven't done a whole lot of it. I've done a couple one lines, but not too much. So we're really not using AutoCAD very much anymore.
Yeah, in a previous slice, I did a lot of remote desktoping for CAD stuff when I was in the industry and doing all my mechanical stuff, and I was doing that back when it was 3G. Things have changed quite a bit. When it was 3G, it was extremely slow and tedious and time consuming to sit in a job trailer. I would actually save up all my work from the week and go into the office at noon on Friday and get all the work I could get done from the trailer during the week in 4 hours on Friday. So that gives you some sort of idea how slow that connection was. You know, obviously we're at 5G now. That's a big difference. That's a huge difference. So, you know, best practices for using AutoCAD through remote or VPN, guys, it's either or. Obviously, if your remote connection, your heavy lifting is being done right at the workstation that you're remote connecting into. If you're VPNing, the heavy lifting is being done by the machine that you're sitting in front of. So just some things to kind of keep in mind as to how you may structure that.
I could say before all of this happened, I had used AutoCAD with a remote connection, and it's terrible because you just have so much lag in the mouse with it. But you know, the VPN, like I said, it's a little bit slower. You definitely tell a difference, but if I have to pick one, I would rather VPN than remote. But then again, you have to have the software to do that. You have to have the hardware to do it too. So it can be challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I see that we've got some more questions maybe trickling in here. Let me take a peek. So I think we've answered this one, guys, but just ask it anyways. Anyone out here using or having any issues sharing the screen with Teams for Revit? John, you had mentioned it's tough to see on a cell phone. Does anybody run into any challenging issues with using MS Teams and trying to see Revit screens?
No.
A lot of people like to use multiple screens, and so that doesn't work super great on Teams. You have to pick one or the other. And so whereas my normal Revit setup, I have my workspace in the middle, and then I undock my browsers and put them off to the side. You can't do that if you're sharing. You have to dock them in, and so that can kind of change your workflow. But a lot of people don't have multiple screens at home anyway, so it may not be that big of a deal.
Sometimes you don't get the drop downs. You know, when you share the screen, the drop downs don't appear for me.
I think the only issue that I think we ran into with that was, and I believe one of the attendees here mentioned it too, was that it can be jumpy when you're trying to view it from user to user, and it kind of seemed like as if they were on different platforms. If one was remote desktop and the other one was maybe using a team viewer or something else or whatever, you know, it seemed to kind of create this like it would be jumpy. It would kind of create this fuzzy feature or something like that, like would kind of flash on and off a lot, almost like your old CRT monitors. You need to, you know, hit the degauss to get back to regen. So that was really the only thing that we kind of ran across with it.
One practical thing too is if you're dealing with someone that doesn't have great internet connection, when you're sharing your screen, turn off your video, and then that's less data going back and forth. Or maybe even consider a cell phone call instead of audio through the computer. That's less data that their internet connection is having to handle as well.
No, that's a great point, Steve. I've been having to think about that just myself even, right? There's only so much bandwidth available. And if you cloud it with a bunch of stuff you're trying to do, you're multitasking, that has an impact, extreme impact.
I've noticed what is being shared also has a difference. You know, if someone's sharing a machine and then they remote into a machine where they're demonstrating Revit, I've seen some lag and latency there. So usually I'm always sharing the screen where the program is actually running personally. But.
Yeah, and that's I haven't seen any issues, but then again, we're doing some of those things where, you know, normally the question will start from a phone call to my cell phone. So we'll just do the screen share. So we're only sending the screen back and forth. And then the other thing that is most of my team is all in the office still. So the only person who's remote is me. So I think that might make some of it a little less jumpy too, just because they're on the actual network. They're hitting the source. I would guess that if you went through a couple portals, like what Blake was saying, that it could get jumpy at that point, but I haven't seen it on my end.
Okay. Well, awesome, guys. Thank you so much. I think we're going to ask one final question here. I wasn't going to do this because I noticed the time, but I think this is a great question. And it's basically a scenario question. If you're, you know, let's all put on our way back hats, get in the machine with Mr. Peabody, and go way back to when we all first started. right? We all first started CAD or Revit or anything, and a lot of us started at smaller firms or single firms. We were the only person, or we were a small team. And the question is, where did you go to learn the most about what it is you know today? And that's a pretty broad question. But the caveat is, what kind of free stuff is there out there for you to leverage, to learn and get better and grow? I'll just leave it open, guys.
I'll jump in. So one item that I've got a lot of sweet tricks out of, which a lot of people don't utilize too often, is Augie forums. There's some smart people out there, and I've found some things that didn't exist other than in Augie forums. So that's one place where I've got a lot of good ideas that came from.
Yeah, one of the things that I did was asking the people you work with is just some of the things that some people know they don't necessarily bring to the forefront. Like a lot of us on the panel, we're known as being the guys that if you have a question, come and ask us. But there's also people in the company that might not put out that same presence of, hey, I know a lot of stuff, but when you actually get down to it, they're never coming and asking me questions because they do know that stuff. And tips and things like that. Anything you can do as far as like the Augie forums, things like these webinars, I started sitting on these just to be able to pick up, if I could pick up one little hint or one little tip, that was enough. That made it worth it. And then, a lot of it comes down to experimenting. A lot of content creation comes from experimenting, thinking, could this do what I want it to do, and testing it. I can't tell you how many times I've failed in trying to build something. And at the end of that failure, I came out with something better than what my original thought was. And that's where, if something's failing, ask the people you work with. And, maybe they don't do a whole lot of stuff, but just that conversation might spark the idea.
Well, I know one of the things I like to do when I first started was just talking to other people about it. I mentioned this the other day when we were talking. When I went to MU and actually got to talk with people that work with this stuff every day, it was like I not only got to talk in a way that I didn't have to adjust what I was saying or clarify things, people just kind of understood, but I also understood and I started to learn more. So what I started doing after my first MU, I started seeking out local groups, and I come to find out there's actually like a local BIM group 15 minutes from my house, and they get together like once a month, and they have, either I think they were doing a brunch at the time, and then a happy hour. So they were alternating months doing that, and it was great because you end up talking to people that are similar problems, and you troubleshoot, different solutions. Maybe someone mentioned something that they've developed. It's like, oh, that's applicable to my world. I just need to adjust it in this way. So just that conversation, that open dialogue, if you can find a way to open that up, whether it's a local group or if it's, I've seen a handful of online roundtables after once COVID started, anything like that, where you can just talk to other people and get some ideas that'll spark you into something new. It adds so much value to what you can do. You're no longer that one guy. There is a world of other people that are doing stuff that you can talk to, figure out what you want to do going forward.
Yeah, Lucas, that's quickly said. And I think to add to that is some people hesitate on asking the question. Usually it's some sort of barrier that you've hit that you need an answer to. Reach out to your peers, reach out to, it could be as you mentioned, an Augie post, just post the information of what you're looking for. There are people out there that are really thirsty to answer people's questions, and they have knowledge that they're willing and wanting to give and share. But you have to ask the question. You have to put yourself out there and say, hey, I'm having a problem with this. This is what I'm trying to achieve. Does anybody know how to move forward? The vehicles are there. You just have to put it out there. You could start with the 8 of us right here. Any of us would be happy to help. That's the way. It's the best way to learn.
Yeah, and this is one thing I've always been amazed with this fraternity, if you will, of users and BIM managers, is that, even though some of our senior leadership at certain companies might not be too excited for us to share things back and forth, at this level, it's all about the sharing. It's all about the conversations. It's all about the camaraderie. That's where all of us have been able to get to where we are today, and I think that's really good advice. Is just leaning on your peers. You know, John and I used to work together at CTC. There's still things I leverage John for, even though he works for a completely different company, because I know that John knows this stuff, and you just need to talk to him, and he can point me in the right direction. And I've called every single panelist on this call at some point to ask for some sort of advice or favor. So that is absolutely true. Well,
Another
everyone,
thing I wanted
go ahead,
to
John. Go
point
ahead.
out is I've got some of the best innovative ideas from brand new users who didn't know that they couldn't ask a question. You know, or you know, whereas some of us have, you know, so much time in the software, we stopped asking some of these really basic questions. And, you know, when I was doing trainings, people would go, "Well, hey, can it do this?" I don't know. That's a great question, and it turns into something really incredible.
Yeah, I would say I know
Absolutely.
John and I, you and I both, we went back and forth with some of that stuff, and it just improved stuff. You know, the thing I always tell people is, look, I'm not going to give you what I have, but if you have something that you know you want to work, I am more than happy to work with you to help get your product to work. You know, I'm not going to hand it to you, but I sure as heck will help you improve something, because at the end of the day, I probably learned something from it too.
Mm-hmm. Nope, absolutely. Well, guys, I think it's about time to wrap everything up. We went a little long today, and obviously, if we could keep going, we totally could. We could fill days with this content and this discussion. Guys, this has been a pleasure. Going on a limb here, I miss this. I miss the conferences and the opportunities that we usually get to have these types of conversations in person. So thank you guys very much for attending. And then obviously all the attendees that showed up, thank you very much for coming, everyone. So with that, guys, we'll say our goodbyes and get back to work. So thank you so much, everyone. Go ahead and wave and say your goodbyes. And
We'll see you guys.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. See you later.
Thanks,
we'll be talking to everybody soon, guys. Have a good one.
All right. Take care. Stay safe.